Again, warm welcome to everyone who's connecting. And I'll apologize in the name of one of our co-speakers who just turned out that he cannot make it. Our member of the board, and unfortunately some urgent family business, some emergency kept him out of this call. So apologies for one of the co-speakers missing, and I'll hand over here to a good friend and partner, Tomasz Kasprowicz, editor-in-chief of Republika Nowa, who will introduce the panel and get the discussion going. Tomasz, over to you.
Thank you very much. I will start with some intro and organizational part. In general, let me start with inviting you all to our next event just on Monday. And we meet at 2 p.m. to discuss the results of the elections. So please, if you're interested in those results, and probably many of you are, please join us. There will be Wojtek Przybylski, that you already met, together with our Marcin Klub fellow, Filip Fritz. So that's an invitation for Monday. And let me just say a few words about how this event will be constructed. So for first 30 minutes, we'll make a, say, close discussion with our guests, and this part will be recorded and available. So this is a more official part. The second 30 minutes will be more of a internal discussion with the questions and comments from all of you. This part will not be recorded, so you can feel free to share any of the comments you may have. If you have any questions going forward, please don't hesitate, and you don't have to wait till the second part. Please use the chat and write your questions there. They will help streamline the discussion for me. So don't be shy and share your thoughts even earlier than the second half of this discussion. Today we are discussing the growth of the Central Europe and how to finance it. So this is a very important topic for us, and a challenging one, especially in the current circumstances and all of the pressures that we are currently facing. And our guest today is Charlotte Root, Managing Director for Central and Southeastern European of a European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Hello.
Hi, very pleased to be here.
Thank you very much. And Jakub Landowski, Czech Ambassador to NATO, which I'm not sure whether he joined yet, because I don't see the picture. Well, we'll see about that. Let me ask first about the initial remarks. I will just share our results of our short Twitter questionnaire that we had over the last couple of days, where we asked what's the most important part of the most important factors concerning the growth of Central Europe. And we had two almost equal candidates, one of them being the changes in technology and artificial intelligence, and the second one being the changes in demography. It seems like both of them are kind of working in opposite directions as for now, but maybe one could be a cure for the other. The far third option was the enlargement of the European Union as something that people pointed out, but that wasn't considered as important. With this as something that is, let's say, food for thought, but not necessarily the most important part, I would like to ask Charlotte to give her initial remarks about the problem that we are discussing today.
Okay, well, I understood that we are going to discuss a bit about Central Europe and also a bit about Ukraine and the impact of the war and also on these countries. So maybe just to say that Central European countries, and I include Southeastern European countries like Romania and Bulgaria in this, they're, by and large, because I would say all except Hungary, which has had a different approach up to now to the others, have been very, very committed to Ukraine's victory in its defensive war against the aggression of the Russian Federation. They have made considerable efforts to facilitate movement of goods in and out of Ukraine, whether by road, rail, or the maritime routes, which have hugged the shores of Bulgaria and Romania, coming from Ukraine. And, rebuilding Ukraine is not just some future endeavor. This has been a constant effort since the hostilities began. We've been working as EBRD with others as well to keep the lights on, to keep the trains running, and the economy and the agriculture as well, the production working. So there are numerous working groups which have been established to coordinate international assistance from the EU, from the G7. These involve neighboring countries, the IFIs, which include, of course, EBRD. That being said, Ukraine's closest neighbors in Central Europe, the Baltic states, Romania, Bulgaria, they will play a very important role when it comes to proper reconstruction, when hostilities cease. They will be a location for infrastructure contractors rebuilding municipalities and other infrastructure. It will be a launching point for private investment also from these countries. And to make all this work, there will need to be a lot of investment in improving the cross-border transport links. Up to now, these links are not the best. And those roads that are used, particularly from Poland across, they're not the quality that we would need in the sort of able to handle the traffic that would be moving things when it would be real reconstruction. So up to now, we have assessed, there's a working group involving the EU and the World Bank that has assessed $152 billion worth of direct damage as of the end of last year. But the indirect costs of recovery and reconstruction is now estimated at roughly $500 billion. Notably, the energy infrastructure has been most badly damaged, with more than half of the capacity having been knocked out. So we, as EBRD, we participate with others in the Multi-Donor Coordination Platform Steering Committee. This is led by experts of the G7. And then there are IFI coordination meetings with us, the European Investment Bank, World Bank Group. And this is a rotating sort of chairmanship, working together, of course, with the EU. And the work led by EU is from the DG Near Ukraine service. So in Central Europe, I would just like to note that there's already been substantial private investments. Our Polish client, Cersani, which is a producer of ceramics, has expanded its facilities in Ukraine in this period. We see other foreign investors coming into Ukraine. Our president recently was traveling in the 3 Baltic states, where a lot of interest was expressed in investing sooner rather than later. So this is very encouraging. So I mean, these are sort of the key points I wanted to make on Ukraine up front. But for Central Europe, we've seen a massive increase in investments in the last few years. We used to do, as a group of Central and Southeast Europe, around 2 billion overall. And last year, between Southeastern Europe, which does include the Western Balkans, and Central Europe, in our group, we did nearly 5 billion euros. So it was really substantial. 2.6 billion in Central Europe alone, of which half was in Poland. And what is all this investment going into? It's mainly about greening the economy. So we see the electric vehicles value chain growing, a lot of investments in battery capacity, a lot of investments in innovation and looking at different ways to digitize the economies, also to save energy. Hard to abate sectors are getting grants from the EU's Modernization Fund and Innovation Fund, and we are seeing opportunities to co-finance there. And renewable energy expansion has been tremendous across the region, both wind and solar. We're very pleased. We participated in the financing of the first offshore wind farm in Poland last year. Very big deal. And we are now getting the approval for our participation in a second one. We see Romania moving forward with ambitious renewables auctions, as is Bulgaria. So it's a region that is really investing a lot to green itself. And while, there might be some question marks raised in the current political context with the European parliamentary elections, we don't know, what is going to be the composition of the next parliament and commission, and whether they might try to backtrack on some of this sort of the EU green agenda. But I think that when the private sector starts investing, they go ahead. Donald Trump tried to roll back California energy efficiency standards, and Detroit was hearing nothing of it because it didn't make sense. So I think that is the same place where Central European economies are, and it's great. So it's really created a lot of business opportunities for the EBRD, but in the future, it will offer a sound base for growth in these countries.
I would like to get to what you said about those two elements of the investment, the upcoming reconstruction of Ukraine. That's going to be a huge spending of about, as you said, $500 billion. We have quite a lot of investment needed here in Central Europe due to greening of the economy. We are far behind and where we were supposed to be, and we lost some time already. Is there or is there not a competition between those two needs? So should we be afraid that the construction of Ukraine may siphon out the funds that are needed for the region for the other purposes? So is it a competition, or maybe there's a synergy that actually those two can boost each other?
Well, in fact, I think it's the latter, because first of all, remember, at European level, the financing that is going into Ukraine, the big money, is apportioned according to the GDP of the different countries. So Central Europe is not going to be paying the lion's share of the cost of reconstruction of Ukraine. On a European level, it's going to be shared around, with Germany paying the biggest bill because Germany is the biggest economy. And, that's just the way it works. So first of all, that means that what is left over in these countries for their own investments is not going to be so substantially hit. But moreover, that reconstruction effort is just going to generate a lot of economic activity, and that is going to create the need for investment and jobs in Central Europe. And I believe the money will be there for those investments that need to be made. I think, there are other questions one can pursue about the demographics and the countries that are realistic with the fact that it's a region with an aging population, and they're not growing their own populations, so they're starting to import labor. And, you can see this in Croatia, for example, or Romania, where when you visit hotels, you're very likely to be served by somebody who grew up in Southeast Asia. And that's all right. They're bringing these people into the country and making it possible for them to work and contribute to the local economy. And I think that's going to be something that other countries that haven't been doing that yet will have to consider.
Yeah, one of those countries being Poland, among others, which is kind of schizophrenic right now while we are accepting millions of workers from Ukraine. At the same time, we are pretending we are not doing any immigration into Poland, which is kind of schizophrenic. Well, of course, what you're saying is very important from the point of view that when the rebuilding of the Ukraine will commence, a lot of those people will return, and that will probably show a lot of the shortages in the workforce that we need to look elsewhere as well. I'm also thinking about sources of financing of all of those things. Of course, the allotment of the EU funds are important part of it, but I'm thinking about also developing of the financial markets in Europe, which are, as we know, lacking. I was reading Letta report recently where he's focusing on that issue a lot and proposing further unification of the financial markets so that this challenge can be overcome. Do you think such movements can really mobilize the private savings to finance more of the growth?
I do. Look, we did a really exciting project with NASDAQ in the Baltic states and with the three governments, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, to work on a consolidated index and to really have those three exchanges work as one exchange. And in fact, it was very effective. So MSCI recognized the three as a united index and gave them frontier status, which otherwise they were too small, any of them individually, to achieve. Now, frontier is not the greatest because with frontier, you're still missing the emerging and developed market status investors that only will invest. It's a much bigger pool of money that goes into those more advanced rankings. But it shows that smaller countries can unify their markets and it can work. And so this is something that we have spent some time talking with some of the governments in Central Europe to look at bringing together and starting to work from a common platform, because we see a lot of benefits for the region. I mean, the alternative is you have a bigger organization like Euronext come in and acquire local exchanges, which doesn't give them much say. So we'll see. It's kind of early days on these discussions, but I think that the Letta report and the awareness that something needs to be done to sort of push this agenda is getting attention at the right levels in governments. So I feel a bit optimistic on that. And I hope that we will be able to see some progress in Central Europe on the securities front.
So that sounds good, but as we know, not everything works very quickly in the Europe. So probably we'll wait for that quite a while. And from the investment point of view, of course, we have the let's say public institutions. But can you tell me whether investors broadly are perceiving the Central Europe differently due to the new risk profile? Let me put it euphemistically, or put it bluntly, the war. Do we see reclassification of Central Europe from the point of view of investors into, let's say, higher risk brackets, or they discount the risk of escalation to a large degree?
I think it depends a bit, okay? I would say there are some markets that are small where there was a lot of institutional investor money coming from North America in particular, like the Baltic states. And that money has really kind of disappeared. What we see when our clients do a bond issuance or an equity listing is institutional money is coming locally, local pension funds, local insurance companies, maybe European, but definitely not outside of Europe. On the other hand, in Poland and Romania, sort of bigger markets with direct borders on Ukraine in both countries, less affected, much less affected. A lot of FDI coming into both countries and a lot of local investors actually plowing money back into the countries. So in Romania, we've seen a lot of investment in the tech sectors. and automotive. And in Poland, I mentioned earlier, electric vehicle value chain is growing. And, we see our Polish clients just investing a tremendous amount these days.
Yeah, sounds quite reassuring. Let's hope markets are right and there will be no escalation. That would be quite good news for everyone, I suppose. One more question in this section I have for you is that one of the pressure we'll be facing in Central Europe is, of course, the defense. That will be a huge thing for the funds going forward, starting with rearmament and building fortifications and other things proposed and already implemented. Are there any discussions about the funding of it? Of course, the defense so far is solely the decision of the sovereign nations, but it seems that the spending is, let's say, not equally distributed due to geopolitical issues, of course. Are there any discussions about how to make that possible without condemning those countries to stagnation due to the huge spendings for defense?
Well, look, the macroeconomics of the countries in the EU, of course, they're monitored very carefully and things on the EU level. And so I think that governments are very concerned where they have sort of difficult fiscal situation and making sure that they have a plan to remedy that. So I think in the medium term, that's not such an issue. I mean, what we have seen is very strong pressure on the European Investment Bank for that bank to help with financing dual use military investments. And their president come out and accept that this is something that their shareholders want and they will proceed with. We haven't had that question put to us quite like that at the EBRD, and we have prohibitions against investments in the military. I think that what we can do to help the governments is to help them with other investments, leaving their budget free to finance those things directly from their budget. But it's true. Poland is spending 4% of GDP on the military, the highest in NATO outside the US, I believe. So that's a lot of money. It's absolutely not my place to question, really.
Thank you. I see that Mr. Landowski managed to join us. Hello.
Good afternoon. I'm so sorry to be late, but at least I will be there for the question time. I'm confirming that I can hear you, and I reckon that this is a public broadcast, right?
So yes. So let me extend the recording session just a little bit, so I can ask one question before we move to the questions and answers. My question concerns the defense. We started discussing it right now with Piotr. And my question is, when we are talking about the financing of it and how big of a burden it is on the public finance in particular, should there be some mechanism to help out, starting with the simple ones, like easing on, say, budget discipline from the point of view of EU, which would be one part of it. Two, maybe some sorts of funds dedicated to heavily affected countries. So should it be more of the international issue, or should it be left to the sovereign states as it is for now?
Well, I think the treaties speak in favor of the individual state approach, but I take it that even European Union is trying to gather together financial mechanisms that will allow basically common funding of a certain defense initiative. But the main thing was mentioned in the previous contribution, that's changing the perceptions and understanding of defense as a, I would say, common good for the entire society. I strongly disagree with bundling defense together with sex industry and gambling into negative taxonomy. A part of the problem is that these restrictions are self-imposed, part of the ESG that the companies are taking upon themselves voluntarily, but they take them not for their own amusement, but because they think that the people inside the society think or deem necessary to label defense as some kind of a wrong or bad or unwelcomed investment. Once we overcome this, and I think this is happening, of course, there are still some islands of resistance, but it's happening. We can talk about reforming the European agenda. I think the conversations and debates about the EU Commission on Defense were very pertinent in that case, but it will also need to open the treaties. And I don't think there is enough momentum now to open the treaties and do things seriously within the European framework. But we are trying to do them in NATO. There are several initiatives that are covering existing procurements, like things done under the NSPA, but also investment into protecting and keeping our technological edge, including NATO Investment Fund and Diana as a defense accelerator. But this question is highly political. I think the market is sometimes failing because the defense market in general is the market where there is a multitude of companies of different sizes, but the buyers are mostly states, I think exclusively states. So it's only to the buyer segment to decide how to structure the market. And here I am in favor of making the defense market as competitive as possible, because to really keep the prices affordable and to keep the innovation in sync with the world's products, we need competitive markets. And that leads to a very distinct debate on both sides of the Atlantic, how to either be very bold and construct some kind of transatlantic market, or how to layer up the efforts within the European Union as far as the European states can go, which means this so-called initiative to limit the fragmentation of European defense industry, which in itself is a good thing. But the question we need to answer is, when we talk about the consolidation, who will be out of business? Protection of small and medium enterprises is one thing, and also respecting that in terms of development of high-end capabilities, Europe doesn't have much to offer. A salient example might be fighter jet, in which most of the European countries, I think more than 90%, are buying F-35 because there is no comparable platform made inside on the European continent as we speak. So these questions are accelerated by the overall security situation in Europe. We need to take this very seriously and not to end up only on a transatlantic note. It makes sense if we increase the defense spending, and Poland as a country that spends 4% was already mentioned. It's justified that part of this effort, this investment, will be done through our own capability and capacity of our own industry and not only through international trades. So it is justified to do this. But the problem in the EU is that we are sometimes trying to make a new monopoly, deciding on a state level that there will be one new platform, for example, new European tank or new European armored personnel carrier that everybody will have to buy, and it will be a consortium. And these consortia are usually, whilst not having any competitor, not the best to make the best product, which will be competitive and best on the market.
Let me just follow on one thing that you said. Sorry for extending this part, but there is something I would like to ask. This idea of common European procurement, how does it comply with this approach?
Done by the institutions or states together? If it is states together, 2 or 3 plus consortia of states, this is very good, especially in a generic products like large caliber munition, rockets into air defense. because these investments, these vital investments needed to extend or increase the capacity to make these products, need a longer horizon for investment. We need to bundle up several buyers and prolong the period so we can get to good numbers that will justify this decision to invest. A good example might be the new production plan for Patriot missiles done in Germany. And in the beginning, there was an order for 1,000 Patriot missiles for 5.2 billion euros, which enabled those three nations, Germany, Netherlands, and Spain, to, let's say, agree with the industry that new production facility will be built. But at the beginning, there need to be a mechanism which will bundle up together several buyers and extend the horizon for several years to get numbers that will justify the investment.
Thank you. I think at this point we will be closing our first part with the recording.